Open your ears, I promise this will take a second. Put you on game, my brother, teach you valuable lesson. Respect yourself, we happy, no need to reminisce. No need to worry, you chillin' with men with confidence. Speak your mind, say what's up with your life. We can teach you wrong for right and take the darkness out your life. So what's good? What's good? It ain't nothing but a small thing. Have a seat, you can talk to us about anything. Money's, cars, sports, or maybe your business. Positive goals in your life support better living. A pep talk to the ones who in the darkest hour. Remember, sunlight comes after a rain shower. There's nothing wrong with the man who take notes. Don't take this as a joke. These words are well spoken. Teammates, cause we playing to win. I have a seat at this table with some men with confidence.
And welcome to Men in Confidence Sharing, where we, the men of a certain age, share our thoughts, ideas, and opinions in confidence. And today we're joined by not the whole crew. We have myself, the host Tony, we have Terrence, and we have Rhino. So we're going to go one by one and say hello to everyone. Hello, Rhino.
What's good, everybody?
And hello, Terrence.
Greetings and salutations, people.
All right. Today we have an interesting topic for you all. We want to talk about a little bit of societal changes and how they see men. Are you an old school man? Or are you a new school man? Are you more traditional? Or are you more new aged? And I'm not going to define those terms for you. I'm going to let you define them in your head, and we'll discuss it as we go along the way. But as we go forward, what do you see yourself more as? Do you see yourself more as an old school or a new school? And I'll throw that question out to the fellas, and let's see what they like.
So I will go ahead and say that I definitely see myself as an old school, largely because I have people constantly reminding me how old I am. That's the gift and curse sometimes of having kids. You know, they appreciate some of the old school stuff, as I do my air quotes, the old school stuff that I show them and kind of put them onto. But at the same time, oh man, you were just old. Nobody does that anymore. That's not how the world works in their infinite teenage wisdom. So I definitely get more of an old school vibe from them. In my head though, and in my heart, I feel like I'm a man who is struggling to mesh the two together, because though I cling to some old school traditional thoughts and things that I was exposed to and taught coming up, now, you know, as the saying goes, when you know better, you do better. I'm starting to see where some of that old school stuff may not have been so great. And having to marry that with the old school stuff that was great is a challenge. So I'm like trying to figure out how to become a middle school versus old and new, kind of a middle school man. That's where I'm at.
I would love to say that I'm that old school man. You know, that Ron Swanson. I go out in the woods and I chop down trees with an axe because I'm a man and that's what men do. All right, I live off the land. I shoot things. That's what I am. That's what I do. But I was raised by old school men and women. But what I am, I guess I'm a product of the old school with sympathies for the new school, because my mindset is, if I'm gonna be able to reach them, I at least gotta be able to understand them. So I do my best to be open-minded, sympathetic, even if personally in my personal life and in my head I'm like, no, there's no way I'm doing that. You know, I'm sticking with my old school ways. I'm sticking with what my dad taught me to be. But that's about where I am right now. I'm trying to carry the torch for the old school with a little understanding for the new school. And that's where I am.
Okay, appreciate the comments, fellas. I would like to believe that I am more old school than new school. I do agree with Terrence that it feels like you're in a constant wrestle, a constant battle with trying to mesh the two together. Like, how do I take the perseverance, the diligence, the hard work, the sturdiness, the preparedness, the strength, the masculinity of the old school,
the thick skin,
and mesh it with the empathetic, caring, involved nature of the new school. And so I'm going to take a sidetrack for a little bit. Here's one of the things that I notice that happens a lot, especially in online spaces, how we tend to romanticize days gone by. Like, make America great again. You know, not political or anything, but just the way that we viewed the past, and we view the men of the past as these great icons, like these stone pillars of perfection. But in the reality is they were flawed, right? That as much as they may have inspired us to be the men that we are today, like, we probably don't want to be a duplicate of what they were back then. Because for a good bit of stuff that they did right, they did a good bit of stuff wrong. You know, it's like there's room for improvement, right? So you kind of want to mesh a little bit of the new school to fill some of them gaps and holes from being old school. You do want to be a little bit more involved in your kids and family's life, right? You don't want to just work 7 days a week, 25 hours a day. The stories we were told, like, I work 30 hours a day, 8 days a week, 13 months out of the year. But it's just something about putting all of that together and making it work.
Exactly. I mean, I know we've all heard the stories like, yeah, man, I had to walk 40 miles to school uphill both ways. And like, come on, really? But at the same time, that idea of, like you said, persistence and not giving up and staying strong and, being willing to put your shoulder to the wheel and push through tough things. Those are still ideas, concepts, beliefs that are needed to this day. And people tend to frown upon it when you say it in the form of, oh, well, suck it up, be a man. It's not necessarily meant to demean or make women seem less than. It's an expression. It's kind of a phrase. Could the phrase be revamped? Sure. But at the end of the day, the message behind that phrase is keep going. Don't give up. Stand strong. Work hard. Those types of things. And there's something to be said for that. Because, if you start leaning in the opposite direction, you'll never accomplish anything. I mean, just think about that for a second. Never give up. The opposite would be always give up. Something seems hard. I can't do this. Then what have you accomplished? What will you accomplish? What will ever get done with that mindset? I don't think sometimes people really think through these things when they're like, that's just a hard and terrible way to be. Now, I get it. I understand too that, like you were saying, with regards to being involved in your kids' lives and stuff like that. Gosh knows that used to irritate the mess out of me sometimes, being in circles of men at, like, let's say like church or something, and there was an opportunity or activity come up and they needed dads to watch the children. Oh, well, I guess I'll babysit. Babysit who? These are your kids you talking about. I've never babysat my own kids. They're mine. I'm looking after my kids. And if I'm watching my kids and your kids are there too, I'm not babysitting your kids. I'm watching the kids. Just that really illustrated the disconnect for me. And I was just like, for that part of the old school, sure, I can leave that. I can leave that behind and just kind of roll that into some of the other things we talked about previously about being responsible and accountable without excuses. That's an opportunity there for that, for sure. But that constant, melding of the two is a process. It's hard. It's not something that happens like, Thanos' snap and bam, it's just done. It takes time. And I think sometimes people need to be understanding of the fact that it takes time.
It does take time. And the thing is, our consciousness, America's consciousness, has changed. It's progressed. You will probably never see a show as wholesome as, say, the Andy Griffith Show again, because our consciousness has changed. We've grown beyond that. But at the same time, if Andy Griffith from 1965 could come to present day and watch TV, his mind would be blown. He would probably think, how far down have we gone as a society? But I agree with doing away with some of the old, because some of the old was pretty bad. A lot of toxic ideas that people maintain needed to go. But I'm all for those better ideals that make us better people. For instance, the family unit. It'd be really great if America as a whole could get back to a place to where we're more respectful of family. And that's not to say that we aren't respectful of family now, because I believe that we are. But I believe that now that we've woken up to that, we need to get to that place to where it's not something that we are striving towards, but something that we're actually living. And I grew up in a single parent home. I knew who my dad was. I did get to go and visit him and see him and whatnot. But it wasn't because my dad was an irresponsible person. Well, I guess he was kind of irresponsible. I mean, 8 of us between 4 different women, that's kind of irresponsible. But my mother at least saw something that let her know, I don't want anything to do with this guy. But me as a child growing up, I was made aware of that family unit, and I've always wanted to be that. I've always wanted to be a father with my wife, raising our kids in our home. That's what I've always wanted. Obviously that hasn't happened for me yet, but if it ever does, I want to maintain that one piece of thing from the past that actually makes a family, make a nation great. That family unit. This family team that's actually working to raise their kids to make a better society. But without the apologies, without the like I said, the toxicity, and I understand why some things were done the way they were. It was to help people to get ahead. Like when I was a kid, I asked my dad for some money. He got very angry, and he told me no. And he told me that if you're going to get anything out of this life, it's going to be because you worked for it and worked hard for it. I took that and I basically ran with it. And there was no argument. I just accepted, okay, well, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. And it's kind of made me a workaholic. But at the end of the day, it's made me a better person. It pushed me past that place to where I'm constantly begging. It got me to the place that, no, I work. I put in the hours, I put in the time, I put in the energy, and it pays off. So that I understand why that was done the way that it was, and I don't consider it toxic. I don't know, maybe I'm one of those persons that's so used to toxicity that it's the norm for me, but I don't consider that toxic. I consider that making me a better person, and I've taken it and used it to make me a better person. And I would like for America to get to that place that we're actually producing better people and not just locking up people because we don't understand them or because of whatever, but actually rehabilitating people and making people better, because that's what's going to carry us further into the future as a nation and as people.
Okay, so let me jump in and kind of pivot the conversation a little bit. Okay, I'll first start by, let's talk about the difference in society now versus past, especially when it comes to men. One word that tends to come to mind is masculinity. It seems that men in times past were more masculine than they are today. I think I would assume that everyone would pretty much agree to that as a whole, right? That men in times past were more masculine than they are today. And
that's fair.
And it somewhat seems like society is not pushing masculinity very much today. I feel like they're pushing more equality, fluidity, not as much masculinity. So on that note, I heard a buzzword from Rhino and from Terrence: toxic. Is there a such thing as toxic masculinity? And if so, could you define it? So I'm going to pass that question to the fellas. And I know that I don't know if y'all ready for that question, but I'll go ahead and toss it to y'all and just tell me what you think.
I don't believe there's any such thing as toxic masculinity. I don't. I think there's just toxicity. That's all it is. You being toxic. If you're a toxic person, you're toxic. Just because you're a woman, that doesn't mean that's toxic femininity. If you're a man and you're toxic, that doesn't mean that's toxic masculinity. You're just toxic. All right. The person that, what's the term? When you convince somebody that they're crazy by doing little things that's not actually happening, but you just kind of pushing it. Gaslighting. Whether it's coming from a man or a woman, it's toxic. I'm not to put a label on toxicity and call it toxic masculinity. You're just demonizing men. That's what that sounds like to me. And why would you do that? So now you're not singling out those men that are toxic. You're putting a label on all men, and so now all men fall under this what you call toxic masculinity, and that's not fair because you can't put everybody in the same box. You absolutely can't. Some people are toxic in and of themselves. That doesn't mean everybody just like them is toxic. So as far as this idea of toxic masculinity, and I know you guys at home can't see me making my air quotes, which I like to make a lot. Toxic masculinity does not exist in me.
Thank you for that. that actually clarified something for me, because I was thinking at first toxic masculinity is a thing, but the way that you just kind of broke it down, said I don't know if it really applies to one versus the other. Toxic is toxic, whether it's coming from a man, woman, male, female, whatever. It's just toxic. And that to me makes more sense, because in my head I am literally thinking about a scenario where there is a single dad who is dealing with, you know, his child's mother, and she, for all intents and purposes, meets the criteria of what would be defined as toxic. You know, if it's toxic for a man to not be present in his child's life and to mislead the child or get the child's expectations up for certain things to happen and then fail and fall short on that, if that's considered toxic masculinity, when a woman does it, like you said, that should be called toxic femininity. And at that point, why are we talking about masculine and feminine? It's just toxic, regardless of who's doing it. So, like I said, thank you for that, because that just like light bulb for me just helped me see that a lot more clearly. And I do agree with the fact that because we're trying to put that masculine thing behind it, is definitely aimed at trying to lessen or devalue men for some reason. And that's probably a whole separate conversation. But just in terms of old school versus new school and traditional man or whatever, that toxic masculinity thing, nah, I don't like it. I don't think it exists either. I think it's just good is good, bad is bad. It really can be that simple.
Okay, so I'm pretty much falling in line with the two of you. I will add a caveat though. I don't believe that masculinity in and of itself is toxic, right? But I believe anything can be toxic if a toxic person gets a hold of it, right? Like you can have you can have clean water, and then someone could make that water toxic. But to say that masculinity in and of itself is toxic, no, I don't believe that. I believe that someone used the traits, and this probably where I'd branch off and be like, someone used masculine traits in a toxic way, right? It's not that masculinity itself is toxic. They just used it as a weapon. And that is that person being toxic, not the masculinity itself being toxic. It's almost like the guns don't kill people, people do. You know, masculinity isn't toxic. People make it toxic. You know,
more or less, exactly.
Absolutely, exactly.
Okay, so it seems like we're in agreement with that. I would actually say that it seems like we had a pretty good discussion today, fellas. Do y'all have anything y'all want to add before we close out?
I don't know that there's anything I want to add aside from, you know, taking a second to shout out, you know, any guys who may be listening and struggling with whether or not they're doing a good job or wondering where they fall in that spectrum of toxic versus non-toxic. If you were doing your level best, a wise man once told me, quit counting your wins like pennies and your losses like dollars. So count your wins and be just as proud of them. And the moments where you have come up a little short, learn from them. Don't dwell on it, but learn from them and quit beating yourself up so much, guys. You're not a toxic person per se. I don't know exactly what's going on, but just trying to be, you know, semi-happy Smurf. Give yourself some credit. Give yourself a pat on the back. Don't let this toxic masculinity thing bog you down or get too embedded in your thoughts to where you don't take credit for your wins or give yourself a pat on the back when you actually do come through and come up clutch and live up to your responsibilities.
Right. And I realize that we call ourselves the Men in Confidence, and we discuss topics surrounding men's issues and men's of a certain age, but to the audience, to the men and to the women, know thyself. Know who you are. Know what your worth is. All right. Don't let anybody devalue you just because you're a man or just because you're a woman. Know your worth. Because when you know how much you're worth, you know what you're willing to take and you know what you're not willing to take. So just keep that in mind moving forward.
Shoot, seems like we do have a bit more to say. Because I'm going to come behind that and say, like, we've been talking about old school versus new school, masculine versus new age and things like that, and toxic masculinity. And I know that a lot of times, I think Terrence said something similar as far as trying to find a way to put together both, to mesh them into one composite man, right? And I'm pretty sure that a lot of men fall in that category where they are trying to figure out, like, I don't want to be, I hate to use the word, I don't want to be totally soft and squishy. You know, I don't want to be spineless, but I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to be a rock either. You know, just non-feeling, non-caring, and just a tool. Like, I don't want to just be a work tool, and I don't want to just be a feeling sponge. I want to be something in the middle, you know, and find your place somewhere in the middle. Find your spot. Find your perfect composite man. And on that note, I'm going to pass it to Terrence for the closing.
Okay, so with that being said, I just want to make sure everybody knows that we really appreciate y'all. Thank y'all for listening. Like, share, and subscribe. God bless you. Good night. Deuces.
Peace.